Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are taking a scalpel to your sources, which focus on these huge, colossal, global power shifts. And the core idea we're chasing is, well, it's almost a paradox. It's this idea that America may be poised to, dominate the next era, but not because it's doing anything brilliantly new, but because, frankly, everyone else is facing these systemic crises.
It's the ultimate dark horse strategy,
Yeah,
really. You win because everyone else is screwed.
exactly.
And we're looking at two fundamental shifts that just redraw the entire geopolitical map. The first is this massive security and trade advantage that's really solidifying in the Western Hemisphere, so the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And the second, which is maybe the most important long-term trend, is this demographic inversion, this looming collapse facing our big economic rivals, especially China.
So our mission today is to connect those dots. How does a country not having babies lead to, say, a copper shortage or even new kinds of warfare? Let's start with that first point, the geopolitical reality of the Western Hemisphere. Why is this region so fundamentally secure for trade?
Well, if you look at the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, the whole USMCA trade zone, we just have this unmatched geographic advantage.
Hmm.
We don't have major security threats right on our trading borders that need constant naval patrols or huge armies, and we're largely self-sufficient. The U.S. is a massive net exporter of both food and energy.
Right. And you compare that to China.
It's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
China is the world's largest importer of both food and energy. For us, keeping supply lines open is an internal logistics problem. For almost everyone else, it's a potential international conflict.
And that global security, that free trade, it's something the U.S. basically subsidized for the whole world after World War II.
Absolutely. Just think about the old world order. If you wanted resources, you built a navy, you went and took them. That was empire. The U.S. just flipped that entire script. We put our navy on patrol globally and said, you can't bring guns to trade talks anymore. We enforced it.
And that's how a country like China, which historically had no real naval power, could suddenly focus everything on just commercial expansion.
Precisely. The system was consciously designed to be, economically unfair to the United States. We took on the full cost of global security.
It was a bribe.
It was a strategic bribe to build a huge Cold War alliance against the Soviets. China's whole economic miracle was built on that subsidized foundation. But now that foundation is crumbling, and China is facing a problem that money and navies just can't fix.
The demographic cliff.
A catastrophic one.
And this is where the story gets really, really alarming. We're not talking about a distant problem.
It's immediate. China effectively stopped having babies 45 years ago.
Yeah.
The one-child policy. We are right at the moment where they are about to run out of the 50-year-olds who run the economy, who pay the taxes. Their entire economic model, which is based on this endless supply of young labor and new consumers, it just cannot functionally work in less than a decade from now. It's like the geopolitical version of the 2006 subprime mortgage crisis. The numbers look fine till the day the whole foundation just vanishes.
And to make it worse, the numbers we've been using for years, they were probably fraudulent to begin with. How did statisticians even figure out that the Chinese government might have been overcounting its population by, hundreds of millions?
The fraud was just systemic. For over 25 years, local and regional governments were lying. So researchers started looking for reliable data points, things you can't easily fake. For example, doctors were paid per immunization shot.
Okay.
So they just lied about the number of shots given to get more money. Another one was kindergarten enrollment. Local governments would inflate those numbers to get federal subsidies.
So when the kids who were supposedly born in the late 90s never showed up in the workforce to pay taxes around 2019, the tax receipts just cratered.
That's when the truth started to bubble up. The accepted range in the sources for the overcount is anywhere from 100 million to 300 million people, or more.
300 million, that's the population of the United States.
Potentially. China's even publicly admitted their birth rate has been lower than the U.S. since 1991. The collapse is much closer than they let on.
And for China, the sources say this isn't just an economic crisis, it's civilizational. It's tied to their actual geography.
Exactly. I mean, look at their map. 70% of the population lives in the north. Their main river, the Yellow River, it's not navigable for major commercial ships. So it's terrible for internal trade compared to, say, the Mississippi or the Rhine. And worse, that northern region is a massive drought zone built on this terrible Lozis soil.
So why is that combination, bad soil, bad logistics, why does that lead to civilizational collapse?
Because if the national logistics system fails, if the trains and trucks stop running, food distribution just breaks down. Instantly. Historically, that region has seen this kind of collapse 27 times, usually famine from drought and failed logistics.
Wow.
But the crucial difference this time, every other time there was always this huge pool of young people left to pick up the pieces and rebuild. This time, that younger generation just isn't there.
That is a truly staggering thought. Which brings us to the great global hope, right? The idea that AI and robotics can just boost productivity and fix the people problem.
It's a very compelling hope, but it's misplaced. AI cannot solve the three things aging economies need most. It can't increase consumption, it can't pay taxes, and it definitely cannot raise children.
Right. An automated factory is productive, but if no one's buying the stuff.
Your economy still collapses. Exactly.
And so if AI isn't helping with the real labor shortage, the welders, the electricians, where is all this AI investment actually going?
Well, 80% of current AI applications are focused on making white-collar workers more productive, or just eliminating them entirely.
So paralegals, junior analysts.
Totally. If your job is basically complex data collation, research, drafting,
Yeah.
you are in trouble. AI does that instantly.
So wait, we have this massive shortage of blue-collar labor, the people who actually build things, and the tech is focused on making white-collar workers redundant.
It's a huge misalignment, the core disconnect of the current AI boom.
And automation is different from AI. Robots don't pay income tax.
And they don't consume goods or raise kids. It's a completely different suite of problems.
The timeline for AI also seems so unpredictable. I mean, we were all floored by the arrival of large language models, but general AI keeps getting pushed further out.
That's what the sources say, that progress is crawling and leaping. The LLM thing was a huge leap. No one saw it coming that fast. But general thinking AI, the kind that can truly replace human-level reasoning, that's not expected before the 2040s.
Yeah.
And even that date keeps slipping.
Which leads to this massive speculation. I mean, you look at a company like NVIDIA, and the sources call it the definition of a bubble.
You have to ask the question, if the core technology is software which can be replicated, why the astronomical valuation?
Right.
The market is pricing in decades of a monopoly that might not exist if someone else has a breakthrough or if there's, industrial espionage. It's a very, very risky bet.
Okay, so let's pivot from the AI bubble to what shrinking consumer bases do to global trade. Aging countries like China or Korea, they can't consume what they produce, so they become totally dependent on exports.
That's right. Your domestic market shrinks, so to keep your factories running, you have to export. And this is the moment where the U.S. consumer suddenly becomes this tool of immense geopolitical power.
Because we're the only big first world economy that's still a net consumer.
We are the buyer of last resort. And denying or granting access to the American consumer, that is a diplomatic and economic lever that nobody else has.
Now let's bring energy into this. The sources suggest the global EV transition. It's just not viable at the current scale.
The math doesn't work. I mean, first, we already know that EV demand drops to basically zero in any country that doesn't heavily subsidize them.
Sure.
But even if you assume the demand is there, the material constraints are just crushing. To get the U.S. to a majority EV fleet in 25 years would require every single available scrap of global lithium, copper, graphite, and tantalum.
Every scrap.
Nothing left for Europe, China, anyone. It's not possible.
And that's not even getting into the carbon math of it all.
Which, as the sources point out, often makes EVs net dirtier than gasoline.
Yeah.
The carbon cost to produce the battery is huge. And if you're charging it on a coal-fired grid,
It's worse than a modern gas car.
often, yeah.
So let's talk about copper. The unsexy mineral, that's the real choke point. Why copper?
Copper is the backbone of everything electric. You need it for batteries, sure, but you need way more of it for the grid expansion to power everything. The sources estimate that for the U.S. to double its industrial plant and expand the grid by half, which is what reindustrialization and AI demand, we will need to consume 12 times as much copper in the next 30 years as we did in the last 30.
12 times. I can't even picture that. And we have the ore here in the Western Hemisphere, but not the refining capacity.
Correct. The ore is in the U.S., Canada, Chile, for the refining and processing. Overwhelmingly in China and India. That's a huge geopolitical vulnerability.
And the grid itself is a bottleneck. Our power demand was flat for decades.
Stagnated for about 35 years. Now, with reindustrialization and AI data centers needing just insane amounts of power, we have to expand fast. The biggest missing piece is high-voltage, long-range transmission lines. And building those is a regulatory nightmare that can take a decade or more.
So what about things like small modular reactors, SMRs? Aren't they supposed to be part of the solution?
They're incredibly promising on paper. In theory, you could plug them into old coal plant transformers. But there's no reliable prototype yet. And in the U.S., regulators treat nuclear power as something that has to run at a steady state. You can't just ramp it up and down quickly.
They see that as a meltdown risk.
Exactly. So it's only good for stable baseload power, which limits its flexibility.
It really sounds like energy instability is going to be a major driver of conflict.
Absolutely. The international energy markets are so fragile. Any disruption in Russia, the Persian Gulf, the Malacca Strait, it could cause a major break. And when that access is threatened, the sources warn conflict over what's left becomes almost inevitable.
Speaking of conflict, the sources point to the war in Ukraine as generating a second revolution in military affairs. What does that mean?
It means the pace of innovation is just mad, is the word they use. Low-cost drones, anti-drone tech, network sensors. We've seen more technological and doctrinal evolution in 3 years there than in the rest of the world combined since the 1960s. The old rulebooks are obsolete.
So with China's internal crises, is a military action, like an invading Taiwan, a real possibility for them, a way to distract everyone?
A kinetic move just doesn't fix their core problems. Demographics, geography, and invasion solves none of that. Militarily, they're completely boxed in by hostile nations. Those sand islands they built in the South China Sea are reportedly already failing.
So aggression is just non-viable.
It's a strategic non-starter, unless
Unless what?
the only scenario where it becomes likely is if the decision-making at the very top breaks down. If the leader is so isolated, having gotten rid of all dissenters, that he's only consuming his own propaganda.
A desperate, irrational move.
That's the chilling caveat.
Yes. Okay, let's shift to some quieter powers. Mexico. The sources say it's becoming this massive industrial engine.
It's a huge, underappreciated story. If Mexico were anywhere else, we'd be calling it a bigger industrial power than Germany or France. Because of its trade with the U.S. and this nearshoring trend, it's becoming a vital part of that secure Western Hemisphere bloc.
And what about alliances? The U.S.-Japan relationship seems fragile.
And it's absolutely crucial. Japan is the second most powerful naval power in the world. They just commissioned 2 supercarriers. They made immense concessions to the last administration, thinking they had this long-term deal locked in. Now, the risk is that a new wave of American isolationism could just throw all that away.
And finally, let's touch on Saudi Arabia, a controversial ally, to say the least.
Yeah.
Why do we maintain that alliance?
Well, the sources frame it as strategic necessity outweighing these extraordinary controversies. They point to the ruling family's historical support for jihadist movements, al-Qaeda, ISIS. And then there's this specific, shocking allegation that MBS ordered the dismemberment and burning of a journalist and then held a barbecue at the site to destroy the evidence.
So with all that, why keep them as an ally?
The only strategic logic is that the U.S. feels it needs to rebuild that old Cold War system. And it needs Saudi crude oil to fuel a new anti-foe alliance, probably against Iran and Russia. It's a brutal calculation of necessity over ethics.
So as we pull all this together, it's clear we're in a unique moment, a demographic inversion and a massive economic deglobalization all at once.
It's a first for the species. And the instability we see is fueled by this. You have these shrinking, desperate young cohorts competing with large, powerful, older cohorts who are becoming, well, ossified, unwilling to compromise or invest in the future.
And the old economic models just seem completely broken in the face of this reality.
That really is the core takeaway. The source material notes that the future literally belongs to those who have children, and it points to impartial data showing the birth rate decline in the U.S. since 1990 has been almost exclusively among cohorts who identify as politically left-leaning, which has massive long-term implications for everything.
So given this global decline and the U.S. using its consumer base as its ultimate weapon, that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener.
What new non-traditional economic model will be required to survive a world where both the labor supply and mass consumption are continually and permanently shrinking? All the current theories, MMT, restricted demand models, they just shuffle the factors around. They don't change the basic math. The math says there are fewer people to make things and fewer people to buy things. That requires a fundamental rethinking of how we create value at all.
A truly challenging question for a world that's, in a way, running out of people. Thank you for providing the material for this deep dive. It's given us a lot to think about.